What's going on, guys? Is Edwin de los Santos the fighter who's going to expose Shakur Stevenson? Well, that's what I've been seeing talked about a surprising amount online in the build-up to Thursday's fight. Because even though de los Santos is an overwhelming underdog with the bookmakers, I've seen a surprising number of comments all over YouTube and actually predictions from respected boxing people suggesting that this fight is going to be a lot closer than the odds suggest that it will be. So my question to you is that going to be the case? Well, in my opinion, the answer is categorically no. And why is that? Well, because to me, this is a classic example of people wanting to construct a narrative because accepting the reality that Shakur Stevenson is not only the most dominant fighter in the 135-pound division, but he might be the most dominant fighter all the way from the 126-pound division up to the 140-pound division. And in my opinion, he might even be one of the top 10 and possibly even one of the top 5 fighters in the world at this point. Now, that needs to play out in the ring and actually be proven by beating all of these other top names. But that's how highly I rate Shakur Stevenson. And I think a lot of people, when you have a fighter who's that good, especially when their talent is more technical rather than basing their skills off of just pure power, there's a temptation to want to look for reasons why that fighter is going to lose. Because you see that in other sports as well. Formula One being an example. And the reason why I reference that, I'm wearing my Formula One shirt as well, is because we have the Grand Prix taking place this week in Las Vegas that's actually bumped this fight from the weekend to Thursday. And in Formula One, you have a champion, Max Verstappen, who's become so dominant that it's actually made the rest of the races boring and predictable in a certain sense. Well, Shakur Stevenson kind of is the Max Verstappen of boxing in the sense that his last 3 fights, and really pretty much every fight he's ever had, have been so dominant that he's barely lost a round. And as a result, people look for reasons to pick the other guy to win. And so when you have someone like de los Santos, who has very impressive punching power and some very impressive highlight reel knockouts in his recent fights, there's a temptation to watch that, to watch his footage and say, wow, this guy's got really fast hands. This guy is just blasting people out of there. I mean, if you look at the Valenzuela fight, you think, wow, if he can do that to Shakur Stevenson, then he might really be able to pull off the upset here. But in my opinion, the big problem with that is the difference in competition between what Shakur offers and then what fighters like, respectively, Adorno, Valenzuela, and Acosta, who de los Santos has been fighting in his last few fights. It's a lot easier to look good and get highlight reel knockouts against those guys when they're not as slick boxers as Shakur Stevenson. And the reason why is because if you watch the footage, de los Santos is able to let his hands go a lot more because the targets are more stationary. They're not throwing as many punches back, and they're not moving as well. So, and this isn't to diminish the fact that he's a very powerful puncher, and it's not to say that he has absolutely no chance whatsoever of winning this fight, but it's just to say that, in my opinion, the narrative which is being constructed that he is going to pull off an upset here potentially is based more on the fact that people watch his highlights, see his fast hands and fast combinations, and then they want to see Shakur Stevenson lose because it's boring to watch someone be so skillful and so dominant that none of the contenders they face really have any chance of beating them. Now, if you watch Shakur, what tactics is he going to use in this fight that make me so confident he's going to win? Well, he just boxes so well. Shakur has one of the best range controls in boxing, and that's going to be a very key asset against de los Santos because he has the ability, Shakur, to sit on the outside, use his jab to keep Stevenson, to keep de los Santos on the outside. If he gets close, he can let go the right hand, but he also has exceptional footwork. So he's going to be able to step backwards and get out of range. And you're going to see, in my opinion, de los Santos having to lunge forward. And that's where he's going to have big problems because then Shakur is going to be able to counter him. And the other thing is that Shakur moves his head and moves his body off of the imaginary straight line that kind of runs between his opponent's jab and Shakur's head. And so by moving very well like that from side to side, it's going to be very difficult for any of his opponents, De Los Santos being no exception, to actually hit him. So what I'm really saying is that his movement, his ability to use the jab, but also his punch output are going to be able to cumulatively make it very hard for De Los Santos to hit him. But crucially, Shakur actually throws enough punches where he's going to be able to pick up points in all of the rounds. Because one area where a boxer can be found out is if they don't throw enough volume. But Shakur actually throws quite a lot of punches. And so in addition to being very slick, he actually gets those points by throwing sufficient volume. And so combining all of that together, in my opinion, it's going to be very difficult to imagine De Los Santos actually closing the range effectively enough, consistently enough, to be able to let his hands go and do what he did to Valenzuela, let's say. But if I'm wrong, I will be the first one to come on here and congratulate him on what will be one of the upsets of the year. It's just going to be very difficult for De Los Santos to beat someone who, in my opinion, it's just my opinion, but in a head-to-head matchup, I think Stevenson beats Devin Haney. I think he beats Teofimo Lopez. I think he beats Tank Davis. I think Frank Martin gets beaten also, and there's a reason why Frank Martin didn't want to fight him. I think he wins all of those fights, and in fact, for me, the only fight which I'm a little bit on the fence about is if he fights Lomachenko, because Lomachenko beat Devin Haney, in my opinion, but in also the opinions of many other people. I think that fight is very close, very competitive, and Lomachenko might be the one who has the slick enough boxing to potentially beat Shakur Stevenson. Outside of that, I think he's the best fighter from 126 all the way up to 140. I think he's one of the best fighters in the entire sport of boxing. And I simply cannot see Edwin De Los Santos springing the upset here. Now, again, if he's able to do that, I will be the first one to come on here, congratulate him, and admit that I was wrong. But I just don't see it happening. And I don't think you should buy into this narrative that he's going to be able to expose Shakur Stevenson, because it's being built more on hope and wanting to see an exciting fight than it is based on the reality, in my opinion. But that's my prediction for this fight. Shakur Stevenson to win in dominant fashion. He's going to become the WBC lightweight champion of the world. And I fully expect him to go on and dominate if and when he fights many of the other big names around his weight division. But let me know in the comments what you guys think. Do you think De Los Santos has a better chance than I'm giving him credit for? Do you rate Shakur just as highly as I do and expect him to dominate this fight? Either way, let me know in the comments. I appreciate you for watching. Don't forget to like and subscribe if you like these videos, and I will see you in the next one.